heart is a sacred geometry vortex. Apparently the heart does not pump blood, but is the vortex regulator of the blood as the blood flows through the arteries and veins. Frank Chester studied Rudolf Steiner and discovered through his understanding of the Platonic forms the geometry of the heart. The discovery of chestahedron, a European journey in the 1990s, led Frank Chester, the San Francisco retired teacher, sculptor, and geometer, to Dornach in Switzerland. Prior to this journey, he had never heard anything about Rudolf Steiner or anthroposophy. He was immediately impressed by Steiner's two-dimensional, seven-sided planetary seals, equally by his seven-sided capitals on top of the columns within the model of the first geotheanum. While gazing upon these forms, a question arose in him. He says, could a three-dimensional, seven-sided form exist that might also demonstrate the harmonic nature of a Platonic solid? Not being satisfied with existing seven-sided models, Frank Chester began to experiment with clay, string, straws, wire, paper, soap bubbles, and all manner of forms. After many failures, he discovered in the year 2000, while artistically playing, an entirely new, never-before-seen geometric figure that was simpler and more elegant than anything seen before. He called his discovery the chestahedron, chestaheder in German. This solid was 7 surfaces with exactly the same surface area. It consisted of 4 equilateral triangles and 3 additional 4-sided surfaces which resemble kites. It shares the same property with the 5 regular Platonic solids in that each of the 7 surfaces has the same area. It's unique in that it contains 2 different shapes and 2 different side lengths, while in the 5th Platonic solids they are always the same. They are always the same. Interestingly, Chester could utilize 2 circles in the ratio of the golden section phi to lawfully and reproductively develop the surfaces of his form. After he had discovered this new form, Frank Chester was not at all clear what its importance would be for the world. A quote from Rudolf Steiner guided him. Quote, geometry is knowledge that appears to be produced by human beings, yet whose meaning is totally independent of them, end quote. Chester continued to experiment for 10 years more. Among the most important findings that he has discovered to date is this. After he had seen that his 7-sided form can be harmonically integrated into a cube when it is oriented to the angle of 36 degrees, and that it appears to resemble a kind of a heart shape when he dipped the wire-frame model into a soapy liquid and created convex surfaces by expanding the enclosed soap bubble gently with a straw, he had an idea. He took a solid model of the expanded 7-sided form and dipped it along its axis into a water-filled vortex chamber. When he spun it vertically, the resulting water vortex was stable. However, when he spun the form attached to a high-speed drill and introduced it into the water at an angle of 36 degrees, a type of pocket-shaped vortex developed on the side of the main water vortex. Through what he saw developing within the water, Frank Chester developed a sculpted model and then opened it in cross-section. This result reminded him immediately of an image of a vertical cross-section through the human heart. Driven by curiosity, his joyous experimental nature, and further inspired by the drawing from Rudolf Steiner, he finally arrived at a 3-dimensional depiction of the formative forces which underlie the human heart and create its asymmetric form through its muscular layers. His conclusion? The formative forces which form our heart muscle are active as vortices and are oriented and maintained through the 7-sided form discovered by him. Since Frank Chester developed this insight, the heart is no longer a pump. For him, it has instead become an organ of flow regulation. If the heart were a pump, the paper-thin tissue at the apex of the left ventricle could never withstand the developing pressure. However, from the perspective of a vortex model of the heart, it becomes understandable why this part of the heart is never exposed to the higher pressures dynamics. In the developing human embryo, blood is already streaming rhythmically through its blood vessels from before the heart has ever formed, something other than the heart therefore must be responsible for this movement of the blood. The heart that develops later appears to function more like a balancing brake. Blood streams into the left ventricle in a clockwise direction and then vortexes around itself, finally merging from the left ventricle in the opposite counterclockwise direction. At the moment when the blood flows reverses, there is no movement, absolute stillness reigns. However, this is a dynamic rest. This is the exact moment, simultaneous in time and space, that for Frank Chester represents the eternally present heart-centered state in each human being. A kind of tetrahedron. After addressing the human heart, Chester then turned his attention to the earth. A further statement from Rudolf Steiner gave the impulse. In a lecture about the causes of earthly volcanism, Steiner indicated that on the basis of his spiritual scientific researchers, the earth in its foundational form was not a sphere, but rather had its basis in a kind of a tetrahedron. In Middle America, at the South Pole, in the Caucasus Mountains, and in Japan, there are 4 corners of the tetrahedron, a form that was created out of the cosmos through the joining together of 4 triangles. Chester's calculations showed that an equilateral triangle would be created if one joined points together in Japan, the Caucasus, and a third point in Kansas, North America, rather than the point in Middle America mentioned by Steiner. An inverted tetrahedron constructed downwards from its triangle would be short of reaching of the South Pole inside the Earth by 4,132 kilometers. In order to reach the South Pole from this tetrahedron, one would have to equally stretch its 3 south-pointing faces. However, with this construction, one no longer has an exact tetrahedron, but rather a kind of tetrahedron. According to Frank Chester, one can open the downward pointed sides of the tetrahedron, hinged to the base triangle, at an angle of 94.8304 degrees. At this point, the 3 triangles stand in the exact relationship to one another as the 4 equilateral triangles in the chestahedron. An inverted chestahedron constructed on the above triangle, formed by Japan, Caucasus, Kansas, touched the South Pole exactly with its lower apex point. Perhaps it was the chestahedron that Rudolf Steiner saw clairvoyantly as the basic form in which our Earth is based and had tried to suggest in his lecture, because a chestahedron could also be described as a kind of tetrahedron. Understanding earthly phenomena. Subsequently, Frank Chester found phenomena which appeared to confirm his suggestion that the chestahedron acts as a fundamental geometric form within our Earth. If one follows a lawful transformation involving surface mapping, it can be shown that the chestahedron has a cube as its foundation in it. With reference to the dimensions of the Earth, this cube has the same diameter as our moon. The Earth's core has a diameter of 3,400 kilometers. The diameter of the moon is 3,474 kilometers. In 2008, scientists at Uppsala University in Sweden published findings that appeared to confirm that the core of the Earth is a cube. Translator notes, specifically the round Earth's core has a cubical iron crystalline structure and not a hexagonal one as assumed in older models. These findings, which are aligned with the idea of chestahedron in the Earth, offer an explanation why seismic waves travel through the core faster along the Earth's axis from pole to pole in comparison to their movement from equator to equator. It can also be shown that notable synchronic lines that join regions of cooler, warmer, and hotter earthly zones in seismic maps correspond essentially to the suggested chestahedron model within the Earth. Perhaps the most impressive application of this work may be an explanation of the underlying phenomenology in the appearance of northern lights. The distribution in the appearance of both northern lights, aurora borealis, and the southern lights, aurora australis, on the Earth's surface seen from space appear to be in alignment with the rings that Frank Chester found in his experiments with the chestahedron creating water vortices while studying the energetic origin of the human heart. Using the chestahedron, Chester found a common denominator, a starting point which promises to offer a deeper understanding of both earthly phenomena as well as those of the human heart. Questions upon questions now arise in me, but simultaneously wonder and awe-filled inwardness are present. Could it be that not only geometric forms lie at the base of the human heart or the earth, but specifically the same geometrical structure appears to be the basis of both, namely the seventh-sided chestahedron discovered by Frank Chester? And further, if the heart is, quote, the center of the human being, unquote, and the heart and earth stand in such an inward relationship to each other through the chestahedron, what then is the earth? How can such questions bear further fruit and insights? This article first appeared in the German magazine under the name The Mysterious Heart, provided to us by Esoteric online website, and it's on Humans Are Free. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.